Conor McGregor flashes his bare knuckles, Canelo fights in Mexico on Cinco de Mayo weekend, and the return of Triple C. This is the Knockdown with Mannix and Morgan. All right, John. Well, obviously a big fight coming up this weekend between Triple C and Aljamain Sterling. But first I want to talk a little Conor McGregor, because who doesn't love Conor McGregor? He was spotted this past weekend at the Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship, got into a little face-off with Mike Perry. When's the next time you think we'll see him in the Octagon, potentially facing off against Michael Chandler?
Yeah, how amazing big of a star is Conor McGregor when he doesn't have to fight. He's the biggest story of the weekend, right? Jumping in the BKFC ring. Listen, for what it's worth, he said he'd love to do some bare knuckle boxing someday. Maybe that'll happen somewhere down the road. I don't see that happening anytime soon. Right now, he's going to be starring on The Ultimate Fighter, which debuts on ESPN later this month, and that's going to play out during the summer. Then he'll be fighting this fall, as you said, against Michael Chandler. I'm kind of thinking maybe November at Madison Square Garden or maybe December in Las Vegas. One of those places where the UFC can really have a big gate. So he will be fighting. It will not be for BKFC, but we'll see him in the UFC later this year.
All right, well, let's talk about this fight that's going down this weekend, the bantamweight title fight between Triple C and Aljamain Sterling. But Triple C really hasn't stepped into the Octagon in 3 years, right? He's had a 3-year hiatus. What are you expecting from him?
Well, that's the big question mark, right? He walked away as a champion. He was never defeated for the title. So in that ways, he's still kind of a reigning champion. But as you said, he's been on the sidelines. Now, I will point out, not necessarily just on the couch, man. He's been very involved in the game. He's been training. He's been coaching. He's been involved in mixed martial arts. And he's a lifelong martial artist that's always training. But you do wonder, after 3 years where you're not going at full speed, maybe you're sparring, but you're not in an actual fight, how's it going to happen? You've also aged 3 years along that way as well. He's 36 as he steps in there. So a lot of question marks around Henry Cejudo, but the matchup itself is fantastic. A former Olympic gold medalist, a 2-division champion. On paper, this is going to be a phenomenal fight.
And you know, it's really interesting. The odds makers have this betting line set at pretty much even. Do you feel like that's a fair evaluation given the fact that he hasn't stepped in the Octagon in nearly 3 years?
It's kind of hard, right? I feel like Aljamain Sterling is one of those champions that doesn't necessarily get the respect that he deserves. I mean, he won the belt with a disqualification, so I think people kind of doubted him a little bit. He has since come back and defended the belt twice, and I think he's fighting better than he ever has. He has phenomenal jiu-jitsu, great grappling game. He's just really in a great mental place as well. The confidence is there. So I do see it as a little bit of a disrespect to Aljamain Sterling that maybe he's not a favorite or a significant favorite here, but I think that just goes to show the respect that people have for Henry Cejudo. An incredible fighter, a dominant champion, as we said, an Olympic gold medalist as well, and somebody that just lives this game. I think he may have been more popular in his time away. He's been posting breakdown videos to YouTube, coaching strategies, all that, and I think people are really starting to see the genius. So I think maybe a little bit disrespectful to Aljamain Sterling, but maybe just shows the respect that people still have for Henry Cejudo even after the time away.
All right, Chris, let's first start off by talking about Canelo. He's fighting John Ryder on May 6th and fighting for the first time since that wrist surgery back in October. What is the state of his health leading up to this fight?
Well, Canelo Alvarez has been training at full strength for several months now, and people within his team say he's good to go and that the injury has been given enough time to heal and he has had enough time to really work with it over the course of the last couple of months. He's comfortable throwing that in a situation like this, which is going to be important. I mean, Canelo Alvarez is a big favorite going up against John Ryder, but John Ryder had a very close loss to Callum Smith a few years ago, who at that point was undefeated and significantly bigger than him. He has a win over Daniel Jacobs, former middleweight champion, and he has a more recent win over Zach Parker. So even though John Ryder on paper is coming in as a significant underdog, Canelo Alvarez is probably going to need full use of that right hand to get through him.
And Ryder has a 32-5 record, has also won his last 4 fights. Do you feel like he's a legit opponent?
Look, I think he's a credible opponent, if that makes sense. This is officially a mandatory title fight for one of the 4 belts that Canelo Alvarez owns. No, it's not a major event. It's not an ultra dangerous opponent like some of the ones Canelo has faced over the last 3 or 4 years. But in this type of situation, I don't think it should be expected that he would take on a world beater like David Benavidez or a rematch against Dimitri Bivol. Those fights are going to be waiting for him as early as September. This fight for Canelo is more about getting back into the ring, testing that right hand out. And this really is win or go home for John Ryder.
Well, I know that you are heading down to Guadalajara tomorrow. The fight's taking place in Mexico. If he does beat Ryder, what would be next for him?
Well, Canelo Alvarez later this year is going to have 2 options. there's Dimitri Bivol, the man that beat him last year, handed him his first loss in about a decade. That's a fight that Canelo has been publicly clamoring for. There's been some debate over what weight class to have that fight in. Canelo would prefer to go back up to 175 and face Bivol for his light heavyweight title. Bivol has told people that he would like the fight to be at 168, where he could potentially, in one fight, compete for the undisputed championship at super middleweight. So there's some discussion to be had there. The other option, which is probably the more marketable option, is for Canelo Alvarez to take on David Benavidez. Benavidez is coming off a career best win against Caleb Plant in March. It would be a Mexican versus Mexican battle between two very popular, very heavy-handed guys, which would probably be the most marketable fight when it comes to pay-per-view buys. But I will say this, Canelo has not really wavered on his desire to face Dimitri Bivol in a rematch. So unless something changes over the next few months, I do expect Canelo to go into a fight in September against Dimitri Bivol.
All right, well, big fight coming up this weekend. Certainly looking forward to it. And Chris, please have a margarita for us while you're down there in Mexico and enjoy yourself.
I'll do that. Thanks, Claudette.